Hi, this is the Shadow Annual, number 2, Agents, and this is one of my first sort of reads of the Shadow comic, and it's by Andrew Helfer and art by Kyle Baker, and we start off with a nice scene of New York City, and there's a drive-by hit on the Shadow. I think this is just a one-off sort of like dream sort of sequence. It's a parody of Citizen Kane, of course by Orson Welles, and Orson Welles was the voice of the Shadow, or one of the voices of the Shadow in the radio series which the Shadow began. I love the art style of Kyle Baker. He's sort of cartoonish, but he's very good with faces. So the Shadow's been sort of hitting his last words are Lenore, in the sort of the same style as Rosebud from Citizen Kane, and it's a parody of the sort of opening of Citizen Kane, and this young reporter is sent out to track down the meaning of this word Lenore, and so he goes to all the Shadow agents and in turn the Shadow agents tell their origin story. And this one, with the moment on the bridge, is almost exactly like a bit in the Shadow movie, almost bit for bit. And so these are set in the sort of 1930s, 1940s, which was the time of the Shadow radio show. This is the early sort of Shadow, the sort of Shadow's glory days. And it's all about the agents telling how they met the Shadow and came to be in the employ of the Shadow. Next we have Margot Lane, and Margot Lane is from the radio show, and the comic plays a really nice homage to that. And on one of these panels we actually have a caricature impression of Orson Welles, which is quite nice. The faces are very good, as you can see. Kyle Baker does good with faces. And Margot Lane sort of furthers the sort of origin story of the Shadow, and before he was the Shadow or Lamont Cranston, he was Kent Allard, as we saw in the very first sort of comics. And it tells that story, and the story of touches upon Shambhala, this mythical, highly advanced place hidden in the Himalayas, where the Lamont Cranston Kent Allard person learns to become the Shadow. So it's got a number of origin stories and how the Shadow came to meet the various agents and sort of the roles they play as well. So it's very much a character-driven story, and also with this sort of Citizen Kane reference running throughout the story. So it's really just a whole bunch of stories in an annual. And it spans the various times, right up to the 1980s, which is when the present story is told. And so you have the Perez character and how he met the Shadow, or how his dad met the Shadow, and thus he met the Shadow. Little touches of humour throughout, not much though. We also have the Twitch character, Twitch, and how he is introduced to the Shadow as well. And we have Elton Barfield, the sort of Tubbs type character, and how he got introduced to the Shadow, and before he was a teacher, he was a wrestler, which is a bit interesting. And in the end, the reporter doesn't find out what Lenore meant, and they all sort of go for a drink, which is quite nice. And in the end, the final reveal, Lenore was not the name of his sled, but the name was Plain. Similar sort of thing. And there's a nice little thing for his master's voice, Orson Welles. And I'm not too sure, it may have died around 1988. But I'm not too sure, but it's a very nice little touch there at the end. And it's a very good story. I give it a 10 out of 10. Next up, we have The Shadow number 14, Body and Soul, Part 1. So I think there's gaps in my Shadow collection, but more or less complete stories. Thanks for watching. Bye.